Hello everybody and welcome to The Real Night Author. I am the author of several fiction and nonfiction books. My debut book was As Gray as Black and White, and my most recent book is called The Hair Dare. I write mostly young adult and middle grade, but I'm also venturing into new adult, but I usually stick with historical. I may every now and then do contemporary, but I usually stick with historical. So the reason for this particular video is that I want to talk about the fact that I am an independent author, and the short of that is indie author. You may have heard that term, but independent authors are different from traditional published authors, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's just get right into it. As an indie author, I am responsible for not only writing the book, but getting the book edited, getting the book blocked, which means formatted in this format, getting the book cover created and signing off on that creative. I'm responsible for getting it published, so that means putting it up on Amazon or Ingram or wherever I'm going to be publishing it. I'm responsible for marketing the book, so I have to create the ads and I have to make sure they get out there. I have to be, I guess, the spokesperson for it. So everything that I have to do myself as an indie author, the trad author does not always have to do that. So let me just tell you a little bit about what the trad author does, or traditional author. The traditional author usually goes through an agent, and it's a literary agent, and that agent will take their book and try to sell it to a publisher. And once the publisher buys the book, they have an editor that edits the book, and they're responsible for getting the book out there. So let me just say that one thing that the indie author shares with the traditionally published author is marketing. We as indie authors have to do all the marketing ourselves. We have to set up our own book signings. We have to make sure, again, as I said, get all the ads out. A traditionally published author has to do some marketing, but usually the publishing company will send them around on book tours and things like that. One thing that is different between us is that I have to pay up front for everything that I'm doing. The traditionally published author pays later. And what I mean by that is, if the traditionally published author gets an agent, and that's a whole nother conversation, because I'm telling you, getting an agent is not easy. Once they finally do get an agent, then they've got to wait for the agent to find a buyer for the book. That may take years. I mean, honestly, sometimes it takes years. And once they do get somebody to publish it, then they have to kind of go back and forth as to how it's going to be done, how the cover is going to go, and all that kind of thing. But if they decide to pick up that author, the publishing company, they will provide what's called an advance. Let's say the author gets $10,000 in advance. That author has to turn around and do what they call earn out. And that means that she or he has to sell enough books to cover that $10,000 advance. If they don't, they owe the publisher money. And that's the difference between us and them. Is with me, I have to put out my money in advance to get the book published. But if it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I'm not out, except, you know, the money I spent on ads or whatever I did to market the book, promote the book, the cover creation and all of that stuff. I put that stuff out up front. Whereas the traditionally published author sort of has to do it backwards. Well, I guess you don't want to go backwards, but they have to pay later, or I have to pay now. So it's either pay me now or pay me later kind of setup. So one of the myths of the traditional authors versus the indie author is that our books are not legitimate. So let me talk about that. Back in the day, when I first started, I self-published a book back in the day in 2009. And that's when people were rarely self-publishing. I had to actually go to a printer company, not Amazon, because there was no Amazon. I think CreateSpace had just started. And so you had to get your books published that way, created rather that way. You still had to hire a designer and those kinds of things. It's a little bit different now than it used to be. But back then, it was much, much harder to get yourself going, to get yourself started. So one of the things that people didn't believe, and rightly so I think at the time, is that the books weren't really good quality. And the reason for that is that as new publishers, we had to kind of decide all these things ourselves, and we didn't really know what to do. So sometimes our book cover didn't look that great. Sometimes our editing wasn't that great. But as the business, I guess you could say, evolved, we learned that we've got to find good editors, and we've learned that we've got to find good illustrators and those kinds of things. So now you can go to the library and see a book on the shelf, and a self-published book can look just as good or better. These days, that's how much things have changed. So that's one myth that I'm dispelling, is that our quality is not as good as their quality, and we're legitimate just as well as they're legitimate. The second thing is, again, the editing. That's really the second part. A lot of traditionally published books get edited by the editor at the publisher, but that doesn't mean there aren't going to be any mistakes. Sometimes there's typos in those books as well, and I have found them myself in reading traditionally published books. And on the flip side, indie books sometimes aren't edited very well at all, and you can tell by reading them that they're not in good quality, and that's because they just didn't get an editor. Well, you can get an editor to make your book sound as good as a traditionally published book, so that's another myth. I get my books edited. Most of the indie authors I know get their books edited, so that's a myth. Again, it's the legitimacy, it's the quality, and those are really the two big things. The legitimacy and the quality are the two myths, basically, so I guess it's two myths and not three. But yeah, so that's pretty much that. I wanted to share this with you guys because sometimes people don't know the difference, and so that's the difference. What I'm going to be coming to you in the future with is I'm going to be talking about a lot of things. Matter of fact, I have a list. I have a list of things that I'm going to be sharing with you guys in the coming videos. And I'm going to be talking about not only my own books, but I'm going to be reviewing other people's books, so you can look forward to that. I am going to be talking about my favorite books that you guys may or may not know about. I'm going to be talking about writers who teach writing. So if you're interested in writing and learning how to be an author, I'm going to talk a lot about that. We're going to be going over craft, we're going to be going over marketing, we're going to be going over ideas and whether an idea is good or bad. I'm also going to be releasing my books on here too, so you'll be able to see my cover reveals, and you'll be able to see, or maybe even hear my audiobook when it's done. So those are the kinds of things that I'm going to be sharing with you guys here. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about all kinds of things that happen on NetGalley and on Goodreads, and don't get me started. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And again, stay tuned, subscribe to my channel, because I'm going to be having a lot of information here again. And I don't want you guys to miss it, whether you want to be a writer or whether you're just a reader. Again, I'm going to be reviewing books that are not mine. I'm going to be telling you about my books, but I'm also going to be helping you with the craft of writing. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.